Hello you guys, welcome to my 5 easy weeknight dinners for my family of 4. In this video, I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite recipes, including a unique crockpot meal, our go-to sheet pan dinners, some of our most loved comfort meals, and of course, a glimpse into how I make cooking at home happen with a baby and toddler. So if you're asking the question, what's for dinner? Just keep on watching. Recipe number 1 is Cowboy casserole. It's a hearty casserole and so easy to make. I make my own homemade cornbread topping that I'll share with you guys here, but you could also simplify this recipe by using a mix. You'll need 1.5 to 2 pounds of ground beef or turkey. I prefer lean ground beef, 1 red or yellow onion, 1.5 cups of salsa, store-bought or homemade, a can of black beans, 1 cup of shredded cheese for mixing. For the cornbread topping, you'll need a 1/2 cup cornmeal, 1.5 cups of flour, a tablespoon of baking powder, 1/3 cup of oil or melted butter, 2 large eggs, and 1.25 cups of milk. I recommend regular whole milk, but used almond since my baby is dairy-free. Start by lightly greasing a 9 by 13 inch pan and preheating your oven to 375. I always dice up my onions for this recipe, and I used to use a yellow onion most of the time when I would cook this, but I've recently switched to red onions for almost all of my cooking. I just find that they add so much good flavor, especially when you're cooking with ground beef. I cook the onions until they're soft and translucent. I would say like 2 to 3 minutes, stirring them pretty frequently. And then once they're at that stage, I add in the ground beef and basically just break it up with a wooden spoon in the pan. This is a great time to add any salt and pepper while it's cooking. And one of the things that I love about this recipe is that while the ground beef is cooking for the casserole, it's a great time to feed your baby snacks, but also get started on the cornbread topping. Almost had a little toddler casualty there, but luckily I caught it in time. I used to be very intimidated by making my own cornbread, but once you get into the hang of it and once you get a few reps in of doing it by yourself, it honestly becomes so easy and like second nature. I will say that almond milk is not the move for cornbread. If you want like a true, authentic, and fluffy cornbread, definitely go for regular milk. It still turns out pretty good, but it's not quite the same as when you use regular milk. So if you're choosing between the two, I would say opt for whole milk if you can, but almond milk will do the job as well. All right, it is time to assemble our casserole. So I scrape all of my ground beef and onion into my prepared baking dish. Because I'm using a lean ground beef, I'm scraping all of that goodness into the pan. If I'm doing like a medium ground beef, I usually will drain it first. After that, you are going to spoon in your cup of frozen corn kernels and mix that in with the ground beef. And then you're going to add in your can of black beans. So this is about 15 ounces, and I always kind of rinse mine first just with a strainer before adding them in. Next, you're going to add in your 1.5 cups of salsa, which is going to add just a lot of moisture and flavor to the beef. And then my secret ingredients, which are a little bit of barbecue sauce. I love Sweet Baby Ray's. And then a little bit of Cajun seasoning just to add some nice flavor to the beef as well. All right, now for one of the best parts, the cheddar cheese. So the cheese gets mixed in with the meat mixture. So basically I just add it on top and then actually stir it into the beef. Because again, my baby is dairy free and I'm trying to eat dairy free as much as I can, I only put that in about, I would say 2/3 of the casserole and mix it up just to try and give it a little bit of a differentiation. And once the cheese is in, it's time to actually pour your cornbread topping onto the casserole. So I'll spoon it out of the bowl and then basically just use a spatula or something flat to kind of evenly spread it across the top, because how you pour it out is how it will bake. So I really try and have just like an even distribution across the top of it before I put it into the oven. So pop it in the oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. And while it's in, one of the things I love is that I have time to just clean up the kitchen, get everything reset before we eat, which is lovely. Our casserole was done at about the 40-minute mark. It had a nice golden crust on the top of the cornbread, so I knew it was ready. I had lots of hungry mouths to feed, so I hope that you guys love this Cowboy casserole recipe. It's one of our family's favorites. Next recipe is slow cooker Hawaiian chicken. This recipe has so much flavor. I prefer to make it with chicken thighs, and it's one of those meals that takes very little effort but tastes incredible. So to make this dinner, you'll need 2 pounds of chicken thighs, a can of pineapple not drained, 1/3 a cup of low sodium soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of lime juice, 1/4 a cup of orange juice, 2 tablespoons of sesame oil, a red and yellow bell pepper cut into 1-inch chunks, a tablespoon of fresh minced garlic as well as grated ginger, 1/3 a cup of brown sugar, and 1/3 a cup of hoisin sauce. If you want a little bit of spice, you can also add a teaspoon of red pepper flakes, but that's optional. Towards the end of this recipe, you'll also use a little bit of cornstarch and that orange juice to make a slurry that gets added into the crock pot, and it gives the sauce a really nice, just kind of sticky consistency. You could pan-sear your chicken before adding it to the crock pot, but to keep things simple for myself, I just remove any excess fat off the chicken thighs, cut it into 1-inch pieces, kind of like the bell peppers, and then add everything directly to the crock pot. Once all of your ingredients are in there, all you have to do is give it a good stir, and that really is all there is to it. Depending on how organized you are, if you make this in the morning, you could cook on low for 7 to 8 hours. In my case, most of the time, we're putting it on high for 3 to 4 hours. So I flipped that over, set the timer on my phone, and then we had the rest of the afternoon to do what we wanted. When I had about 35 minutes to go on the timer, I started prepping a few more things. So for garnishes on this dish, what's recommended are sliced green onions, sesame seeds, and slivered almonds. We really like to eat this with white rice, so I started getting some basmati rice cooked to serve it with, and then also started to prepare the cornstarch slurry. So as I mentioned, that cornstarch slurry is made up of 4 tablespoons of orange juice and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. And basically, when you whisk those together, it makes almost like a thick paste that you will pour into the liquid that's already in the crock pot, and that basically just gives it a really nice sticky consistency, almost like the kind of like takeout sweet and sour chicken consistency, and people will not be able to believe that you were able to achieve that just using a crock pot. At about the 3.5-hour mark, our slow cooker Hawaiian chicken was ready to be served. I swear to you, every single time I make this, my husband always raves about how good our house smells when he comes home from work. It really does only take 15 minutes to make, but it does give that wow factor. So I highly recommend that you guys test it out. Next meal is my sheet pan sausage dinner. I love to make this one in the fall and winter especially. It's so cozy and such a great way to get some good veggies into your diet. The great thing is that I don't actually really follow a recipe. I usually just use whatever veggies are still in our fridge and often opt for ones that are seasonal or on sale. So for this dinner, I used a mild Italian pork sausage, broccoli, sweet potato and white potato, zucchini, an orange and red bell pepper, and then 1 red onion. The way I cook all of this on one sheet is by cooking everything in stages. So I preheat the oven to 375 and I start with the potatoes because they take the longest. So I typically will cut them into smaller chunks, arrange them on the pan with some olive oil and some seasoning, and then I pop them into the oven for about 30 minutes while I prep the rest of the veggies that I will add into the pan for the next round of baking. At this point in dinner prep, my little 2-year-old sous chef decided she wanted to join me, so I pulled up her learning tower so we could finish prepping the rest of the veggies together.
Cucumber's not good.
Zucchini.
Zucchini's not good. And my zucchini is raw because they go in my knife.
For the next round of baking, you'll want to add your sausage to the pan. So I like to cut the sausage up into small little pieces. I find that things just taste better in small little pieces, and I also like that the juices kind of mix with the other things on the pan and add some really nice flavor. So I add the sausages to the sheet pan, and then I pop this into the oven for about another 15 minutes before I add in the rest of the vegetables. I remember on this day having grand plans to try and clean during that 15 minutes, but my baby had other plans. He had been crawling around and wanted me to pick him up for a while, so I decided to opt for baby cuddles during that time instead. For the final 15 to 20 minutes of baking, you're going to want to add everything to the pan. So at this stage, I like to drizzle with a little bit of olive oil just so the veggies don't dry out. And then what really makes or breaks this dinner is the seasoning. So you really want to season it well. I ended up using a garlic plus powder from Costco, an onion powder, some vegetable seasoning, a lemon and herb seasoning, some salt, some pepper. It really doesn't matter what you use, just try and find things that are going to be flavors that are going to complement what you've chosen for your dinner, and then make sure you season it like crazy. After you add your olive oil and your seasoning, give it another just good mix, and then pop it back into the oven for another about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on what you have on your pan. And then after that, it's ready to go. I find that this serves really well with some sour cream on the side. Sometimes we'll also do goat cheese or feta crumbled on top, and it is so good. Would love to see you guys try this out this fall. Next dinner is my classic chili. This is another one of those meals that I usually make up as I go with some secret ingredients, and today we're going to be doing it on a stovetop. So I use 1.5 pounds of lean ground beef, a red or yellow onion, some chili seasoning, which I'll break down shortly, a can of black beans and a can of kidney beans, a can of crushed tomato and diced tomato, some maple baked beans, which makes the recipe, some tomato paste, some beef broth, and some minced garlic. 2 secret ingredients are nutmeg and cinnamon. My husband was thoroughly enjoying my cooking show. So start by dicing up the onion that you're going to be sauteing with the ground beef. And while I'm doing that, I also like to add in anything else that I'm going to be having in the pot of chili that I want to start simmering. Basically with chili, the longer things can simmer in that one pot together, the better it will taste. So I try to add everything in early on that I can so the flavors can start being pulled out. While the ground beef was cooking, I drained and rinsed the kidney beans and black beans. I always drain and rinse those kinds of beans before I add them to the stovetop. The only beans that I do not drain or rinse are the maple baked beans. For those, you're gonna wanna add everything that is in the can into your chili. It gives it a really nice sweet and smoky flavor. I had a friend do that for me once and I have never gone back. It totally transforms your chili. When it comes to seasoning for the chili, I usually follow a very simple recipe that includes some chili powder, some ground cumin, cayenne pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and a little bit of salt. If you would prefer to just use a chili packet from the grocery store, that also works great and will achieve a very similar effect. After I mix that in with the ground beef, I dump really everything into the pot. I want all the drippings in there. It honestly just adds to the flavor. Flavor, I highly recommend adding a couple of bay leaves. They really do enhance the other flavors that are in the chili, but also just add a lot of depth to it. I bring it to a boil and then I let it simmer for about an hour and come back to taste test. Another way that I've been making our dinners just more filling and heartier lately is by adding in homemade garlic bread. So to do that, I use sourdough bread and then I add a mixture of warmed up butter and just garlic puree kind of mixed together. I'll spoon that over the sourdough and then add a little bit of grated cheese on top of the bread. Bake it at 375 for like 5 to 10 minutes, and it's a really nice addition to a more comforting, heartier dinner like chili. Another fun way to jazz your chili up is to add toppings. So you could do cheddar cheese, some avocado, sour cream, crackers, really whatever your family loves. We often do avocado, cheddar cheese, and sour cream when we have it on hand. And of course, some garlic bread as well. The final dinner recipe I have for you guys is this cashew chicken sheet pan dinner. This is another beautiful sheet pan dinner that's full of flavor and crunch, and it's one that we come back to often. You'll need 2 pounds of chicken breast or chicken thighs, 2/3 a cup of roasted unsalted cashews, a head of broccoli, a red pepper, soy sauce, sesame oil, apple cider vinegar, hoisin sauce, minced garlic and grated ginger, dark brown sugar, some cornstarch, salt and pepper, but that's a given, and finally some sesame seeds for topping. So start by preheating your oven to 400 and get your sheet pan ready either with parchment paper or lightly greasing it. We're going to prep the chicken by cutting it into 1-inch cubes, whether you're doing chicken breast or chicken thigh. And what we're gonna do is actually cook the chicken first with a little bit of sauce, salt, and pepper. So the next step is to actually make that sweet and savory sauce. Once that sauce has thickened up nicely, we're ready to put the chicken into the oven. So season it with salt and pepper, drizzle about half of the sauce onto the chicken and give it a really good mix to make sure that all of the pieces are coated. And then we're gonna pop that into the oven and bake it for about 8 minutes. Another thing that I love about sheet pan dinners is that they're fast. So generally while something is in the oven, it's usually a good time to start getting ready to do something else. So at this point in time, while the chicken is initially baking, I typically prepare rice. This is another meal that we love to eat rice with. So I'm making some basmati rice to serve it with. And then I'm also preparing the vegetables that are going to go onto the sheet pan once the chicken comes out of the oven. For the vegetables, we're just going to be cutting them into chunks, but make sure you make them small enough so that they can actually cook in the time that the chicken is going to be going back into the oven. It's about 8 to 12 minutes recommended in the recipe, so I find that you do want to kind of find the balance between having them be large enough chunks, but also small enough that they can cook down well during that time. Arrange your veggies on the sheet pan, sprinkle on some of your chopped cashews, and then add a couple more spoonfuls of the sauce and mix everything together before popping back into the oven for another 8 to 12 minutes. In our family, we are huge fans of the sauce, so I made a little bit extra here so that we could actually pour it over our bowls when the chicken was ready. And this night was a little bit crazy. When dinner was ready, I had to get it to my kids quickly. I literally used scissors to cut it down for them. And then I didn't even have a chance to actually formally outro this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed seeing these different recipes. Let me know in the comments which one you're most excited to try, and I will see you soon.